Hello and welcome to the CPS webcast on the PCR and the smoking cessation support tool. What we're going to do is run through a couple of scenarios in terms of patients accessing the service and show you how the support tool works, and then we're going to show the reports function to give you an idea of how the PCR has been adapted to deliver the new service. So first things first, we're going to log the PCR. Now an interesting point here is that the PCR will have no function for technician or support staff using ID and password for the foreseeable future. And this is because it's apparently quite a large piece of development work to update the system. And it's at the moment some time off, so that's for the foreseeable future. The pharmacist will have to log into the PCR, and then it is up to each individual pharmacy and pharmacist how they manage it within that. So this is the PCR Patient Search screen, as you'll all be familiar with. So I'm going to use one of the test patients, which hopefully most people will be familiar with, Bertie Biscuit. Let's just search for Bertie. And that's his record coming up here. View. And to access the smoking cessation support tool, we go to the support tools tab up here, and then start support tool assessment here. And we've obviously now got two support tools. We've got gluten-free and smoking cessation, so we'll go to smoking cessation and start. What this does is it takes us to our minimum data set screen. So this is the initial data capture, which has to be filled in. So does the client consent to follow up? Yes, and they have to consent, and you can't go any further, and they can't enter the system unless they do. We should have all the details from Bertie's PCR record. So his male and ethnic group, we will say white Scottish, employment status, and paid employment. So as you can see, it's just the data that we're used to capturing in paper format. Tobacco use, again, so on average how many cigarettes the client smoked, say 11 to 20. Housing after waking up, 6 to death, we'll say, and how many times has the client tried to quit? We'll say no. So, data referral and assessment. Now we have to go back a wee bit just to make sure we can demonstrate more aspects of the system. So if we go and say Friday the 9th, and the referral source will send referral, came into the pharmacy and asked. And the intervention setting for us, we're using PCR, so it's out to the pharmacy. And date of initial appointment. So if we put that in for need as well the same day, and it's a one-to-one session. So is it shared between pharmacy and non-pharmacy services? In this case, no. And pharmaceutical usage, we'll just go for the patches. You see, you've got the list of products here that you can choose from. And this, although you can select the product in the PCR, you still have to write a prescription on the CPUS form for any NRT you supply. So we will go for NRT only, and no products. So use that this time. So if we save that, this takes us into our next screen. So usually that would be done at what would be called week 0, and then we would ask the patient to come back in. What's best for using the PCR is to set the quit attempt on the date the patient presents for their first supply. It just works better with the dates in terms of when you can submit the data. So if we put in our quit date, so we were in 9th, so present it back on the 16th of May, and the contact date just the same day. As I say, I'm using dates in the past just so I can show you how to submit the week 4 data as well. So contact type, face-to-face. Has the patient smoked? They probably will have, because we haven't given them any product yet. So let me get a CO reading, just say 10. And the product, just go for the 16-hour patch. Again, even though you take the product there, that's in no way linked to reimbursement for those products. You still have to write the CPUS. So once we've confirmed the quit date here, that will allow us, that shows here in the minimum data set that we have validated and submitted the first payment trigger. So once you've collected the minimum data set and set a quit date at week 1, that is set off and PSD will process that and it triggers a payment of £30. So this section here really tells you how you're getting on with your remuneration for the service. So at the start we get remunerated £30, 4 weeks £15, and then the 12 weeks £20 for submitting that data. So for every patient you would be submitting the minimum data set, which is the start, and the 4-week collection. So for every patient it will be a minimum of £45. Here we have the contact screen. That's quite a good, I think, quite a good feature, although not related to any payment, and you can record this anywhere, but you can record each time the patient comes in. So for instance here, it's another really similar to the first screen I showed there, but we can show you here. So they presented again the 23rd, contacted face-to-face, no, if I update that to CO reading, and we just, if the product's working, we'll just go over that. And we start to build up a history of our contact with the patient. So again, we can record. And again, contact. And again, face-to-face, has the patient smoked? No. This patient's doing very well, so that's fine. Copied. Now as you see, we're building up a history, which you can record anywhere, but I think that's quite a good system. So again, that would be when we come in for their 4th supply, and see reading patch, copied. So we've built up a history here of patient details. So now if the patient's been in for 4 weeks, then we would be entitled to submit our minimum data set for week 4. So as you can see here, there's a target date section which tells us when we can submit that. Now today is the 20th of June, so we're within that window, and you need to be careful with that because you can't submit before, but you can't submit after these dates in the window. So if you haven't submitted by then, the opportunity for payment for that activity is lost. So we're now ready to submit our 4-week minimum data set. So we go next action here, release. And we can see there client information. Was the client successfully followed up at 1 month? Yes, because they're still in the program. But obviously if they're lost, we can fill that in differently. Date follow-up carried out. You can see here. Has the client withdrawn? No. Has the client smoked at all? We'll say no. CO confirms quit. Yes. So here we've got a section here where if we say this CO reading confirms quit, no, or not, in fact not taken, then we can give a reason why. But that's not the case in this instance because they've had good CO readings. And that's us. We just hit submit 4-week data. Now you'll see here, because of the target dates, we can't release the 12-week data until the target window, which is the 25th to the 22nd of August. So that can become a wee bit tricky to manage, but the reports function is actually quite good, and we'll go on to that later. I think at the moment I'll show you another example. So the second example, we're going to use the patient Sally Shortbread. So again, I'm sure some of you are familiar with from getting familiar with the PCR and using the training patients. So we search there and view, and just again go into the support tool, and again start support tool assessment. As you can see, I've got smoke cessation assessments here that this patient had before and the previous patient. That's because I've been using the PCR to practice. So again, just select the smoke cessation support tool at the start. So again, it's just the minimum data set, so I'll go through it as quick as possible. You know, they have to consent. Female, obviously populated from our PCR record. If we go white or British this time. Again, the data that you'll be familiar with capturing from delivering the service before. 2030. So as you can see, just moving through collecting the data as we did before. And it's obviously in the pharmacy. Again, just use the same dates. Using calendar, and there we are. And again, one sessions. And what's shared. And the pharmaceutical use to share, I'm just going to pick varenicline, which obviously we have the new PGD, and the training would need to be done with that with NES and the PGD signed, which is on the back of the circular, just recently released. So varenicline only. And then it's asking us if a varenicline risk assessment has been completed prior to supply. Now there's Appendix 1, 2 and 3 at the back of the circular. Appendix 2 is the varenicline clinical risk assessment form, which needs to be carried out, and then Appendix 3 is a letter to the GP, a template letter which you can use to inform the GP the patient is starting varenicline. So we can see yes or no here, so we'll go yes, GP contacted, and I confirm that I know that the GP must be informed the patient will be getting varenicline. So just tick that box and save. And that's again the initial data capture. So that again would happen at week 0. The patient would come back usually in roughly a week's time. And again you start with quite 10th year. So that's quite useful here because it's actually saying I've missed a data point, so it won't let you submit the data until you have the full details captured. So we'll go back in here and we'll need a referral date. I'm just selecting the dates we used before for the previous patient, and hopefully now that will work. So we're confirming a quick date of 16, same day, and if you contact it face to face, as the patient smoke, they will have that. And we're going for varenicline. Again, varenicline would be the same, that you would have to write a CPUS prescription to be reimbursed for that product. So confirm. And again, that's that data now sent off for PSV to process, so it's validated and submitted, triggers the £30 payment. And again, we've got target dates here to submit our data. So again, we can just record how our interactions with the patient, similar to the last scenario, face-to-face, as the patient smoked. They should be doing better now, so no. Well, in fact, with varenicline that could actually be yes, because they could be cutting down, but we'll say no. And so we'll say they've got to that, and there. So we record that contact. And as you can see, we're again now here building up a history. So I'm not going to go through a few more week scenarios. I think that would be, we've already learned that, so we should hopefully be okay. So again, you can just release the 4-week data. And again, it's just filling in if the client was followed up. So we could say in this case that the patient was lost to follow-up. And date follow-up carried out, well, we couldn't do that. So the client withdrew. So all these areas are now grayed up. And that submits the 4-week data. So you'll still get paid for that even though you've not been able to contact the patient. But obviously they would be recorded as an unsuccessful quit. And that's fine. What's quite useful here is you can record your contact attempts. So if we go in here, you can say, I'll try to contact the patient on, we say 23rd of May, contact type, telephone. And again, it just builds a history of your interactions with the patient and your attempted interactions. Also here we've got the care issues associated with the assessment, so if there was a problem, maybe an adverse drug reaction or whatever, then you can link that to the main PCR. So once you are sure you are finished with the patient in terms of everything's submitted and you don't need to submit anything more, you can complete. So in this case, unsuccessful. And that will close off the support tool. So now you no longer need to fill in anything for this. It's effectively closed off. What to do is when you do that is to make sure that you do not have any data left to submit. So in this case, the patient failed, submitted the week 4 data, there's no need to submit week 12. So we can safely close it off. But if you still have data to submit, do not close it off at the bottom there. So the last thing I want to show you is the reports function, which is quite good for managing your patients and when you've got to submit the data. So I'll just show you briefly here. If you go to reports and then we scroll down to the bottom, we should have our smoking cessation reports. So open smoking cessation reports shows all our patients who are still active on the system. Completed again shows all the ones we've finished, so they're fairly straightforward. No interactions in the last 7 days is good because you'll be able to see patients who perhaps dropped off and you might want to then record a contact attempt and try and contact them. Expiring within the next 7 days is good. Now we don't have any here, but expiring within the next 7 days, if you remember the data window where if you remember the window where the dates were there and you can only submit the data within those windows, that will tell you when your patients are in the last 7 days of the chance to submit the data. So that's a good way of keeping on top of patients you need to submit. No quick date set, that's where patients should come in at week 0 and not presented for their future supplies. So there could be patients in there quite legitimately, or there could be patients who have never presented for to enter the service fully. And then you've got those awaiting your 4 or 12 week follow-up. So that's a good system of just being able to keep on top of all the data that you're generating, really. I hope you found that useful, a brief tour of the PCR. The best thing, certainly for me, would be to just go in and have a play about with the system yourself. It's certainly we are told that the PCR will be ready from the week beginning the 23rd of July, sometime during that week, and obviously, so the 23rd of June, I apologise, and the service goes ready on the 1st of July. So if you get a chance, have a play about with it and get as familiar as you can with the system. I think it will be okay once we get used to it, but the key will be getting used to it as the patients start accessing the new service. So I hope everyone found that useful, and if there's any feedback or any questions, if anything you think it would be useful for us to cover, then please contact the office and let us know, and we'll try and get something sorted for you. Thank you.